Hi friends. So today I'm working on making seam rippers. I make seam rippers and sell them at my quilt shows that I vend at, but they also sell very well at some of the other shows I do, and I'm almost out of stock. I think I have only 4 or 5 left. Now I do this assembly line style. So I make I do all the different elements at different times, and this will take me a couple days to go through and get these finished. The first step is to create the bases, which I'm going to show first. I purchased my seam ripper kits through a company called Penn State. There are other companies where you can purchase them. I just prefer to use Penn State. I will put a link in the description. So here we have, take my hair tie off my hand. When I create my seam rippers, I buy these kits that have all the parts in it. Yes, I know I could purchase all these individual parts separately, but I don't. I buy the kits, that way I know I have everything I need. So my first step will be to open up all these little bags and take out this piece, which is the tube. And here I have a bunch of them lined up. And what I will do is I have my little index card here with my notes from my last session of making these. I'm going to put a wrap of clay around the each end and the center. So it'll end up looking a lot like this. And then I can put my veneer over the surface of that. And when my customers are using them, it gives it a nice place to put your thumb. Because when you're ripping out stitches, you want some place to put your thumb to give you a little bit of extra stability. And this just makes it a little more ergonomic. So today I will be covering these, putting the clay on. I already created this cane, and I'm going to use this to create my veneer. I'm going to play around with it and do a couple different things that I think will be fun. I didn't do a video of me making this cane. It's a basic trip around the world cane. I say basic, it's basic for me. I make these all the time and do different things with them. So this is all ready to go. It's the same all the way through. And I'll be working on that. So my first step, though, is to spend time making these. I'm not going to film all the time I spend making these because this is going to take me a couple hours, but I will do one and show you real quick how I put the clay on to give it that ergonomic feel. Okay, so I'm set up now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wrap this strip around the end of my tube. And these tubes are textured, so I don't need to do anything to them to keep the clay on. There we go. I'm going to wrap that on there. Smooth it out, get that seam smoothed out. And then I'm just going to, using my hands, pull down the clay onto the tube. This actually could be a little bit softer. I thought it was soft enough, but it could be a little bit softer. I'm going to roll that edge down a little bit, because when I put the veneer on, the veneer is gonna go over the top, and I want it to meet up with the edge of the tube. I don't want it to overlap the edge. So I'm going to roll that edge down a little bit there. Smooth that on. There we go. So one side's done. Now in the center, oh, I forgot. Usually what I do is using just a Sharpie, I mark the center of the tube just to give me a guideline. So it's not 1 1/2, it's 1 5/8, right about there. Just gives me a little bit of guideline so that when I put my next piece on, I put it on the center. So this piece is 3/4 of an inch wide this way. And again, I'm going to wrap that around, meeting up that seam. Roll it so that it smooths out, and then pull the edges down. I just want a nice smooth transition so it feels nice in my hand. Gives people something to hold on to rather than a straight stick. There we go. And then for the other end, same as the first end. Oh, that's got a little bit short. That's okay. Now, I know woodworkers will turn this on a lathe. I'm not a woodworker. Yes, I do have a lathe, but I just use it for sanding. It's just a little mini one that I picked up someplace. Pull that edge down so that the veneer has space. By rolling it on my work surface like that, I'm just kind of smoothing those edges up some more. Yeah, there. So we're done with this one. And I have a baking tray here with some accordion folded cardstock, and I'll set that in there, and I'll just bake it on that and then put my veneer on when I'm done. So now I'm going to be spending the next bit of time doing that to all of these and all of those, and they'll be ready for my veneers, which will be the next stage of my process. Okay, I'm back. I've covered all my my tubes with the clay, and I've baked them. I prepared a veneer, and next here I am going to apply the veneer to the tubes. So I've prepared this veneer. This is rolled out on a number 5 on my pasta machine, which is, let me see here, how many millimeters? It's about 2 millimeters thick. And in previous events where I've created these seam rippers, I created these guides. I'm not sure what you want to call them, stencils. Anyway, they are to the shape that I need to fit around my tubes. So I'm going to set these on here. I'll just do one to start with. Move that aside. Set it down on my table. Oh, the first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to take a little bit of translucent liquid Sculpey. I'm shaking the bottle down here to get it down to the tip. I think my bottle's almost empty. I'm just applying a little bit onto each of these. And I'm going to spread it on just so I have a thin layer all the way around. And what this will do, this will help the clay to stick But I don't want it too much on there because then it'll cause the clay to slide. And we don't want it to slide because then it creates air bubbles. So I put this on and I'm going to use just a towel and I'm going to wipe most of it off. I just want it a little bit tacky. And I'll do that with this one too. Rub it all around and then wipe the majority of it off. So I have a tacky surface for the clay to stick to. Now I'm using an X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut this following my guide here. Now sometimes these work, sometimes I have to make them bigger, sometimes I have to cut them smaller. But we make it work. Set those aside. Let's see, where's that camera so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to wrap this around. I made the hump there on my pattern so that it fits on the hump here. And I'm just very gently wrapping this around, trying to make sure I don't get air bubbles in it as I go. Now when I get to this side, oh, you can see that this time this is overlapping on this one in the center, but not on the, well, on the end it's pretty good on that end. This end I'm going to have to compress it a little bit to fit. There we go. And I'm going to, using my X-Acto knife, trim this up so that it doesn't overlap. It just meets that other seam, that other edge. It's funny, these all look alike. All my tubes, I've put the same size on, all of them. And yet when I come to wrap this around, sometimes they just don't fit. Now I'm going to, just using my fingers, smooth this out. That seam's going to show. In this pattern, that's fine. I'm going to fold this over the edge. And then using my tissue blade, oh, I gotta make sure I'm on camera. I'm going to slice that off, just straight across there. And then roll that over the edge so that it covers the gray clay underneath. Oh, I didn't go straight, so I'm just gonna trim some more here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And using my thumb, I'm just rolling that edge over. Just setting it on a flat surface to flatten that out around the end of the tube, because we're going to be sliding in the seam ripper part and all that, and we want a nice fit on the end. Well, that looks about right, except where did I do with, there we go. So I doubt you can see this on the camera, but this is my stamp and it says Jenny P. And I'm going to stamp this somewhere on the design. So it's signed. And that one will go on my tray. I'm going to smooth out some of these little crackles a little bit. I'm going to be sanding this, so some of the surface imperfections will disappear when I sand it. But the more I smooth out now, the less sanding I have to do later. So I'll set that on my tray to bake, and I'll move on to the next one. So this is a little bit different shape. What side do I like better? I think I'll do this one. And again, yeah, I can get 2 out of it that way, and I can get 1 that way. So I'm going to trim this right here. Set that aside for later. Come off. Okay, I'm going to cut this in half. Because I like this. Well, what does this side look like? Oh, I should have went that way. Yeah, I think I like this side better. Oh. And like I did with the other one, I'm going to trim out around my pattern. If I remember right, for some reason this one, I should have made it a little bit bigger on the edges. I can always trim it off later, but it's harder to add it back on. So I've extended it a little bit here and a little bit here on both sides. I think that'll help it fit better. Okay, get that pattern off of there. And because this is bigger on this side, I have to make sure I put this on the correct direction. There we go. And again, I'm going to carefully wrap that around, pressing it down because it's that clay, that TLS made it tacky. Try to keep the air bubbles out. Oh, and again, I've overlapped. But you can see where I can trim it here. I needed to add that extra on the edges. It's quiet in here. If I didn't have the camera on, I'd have the TV on or a book on and tape on or music or something. I don't usually work this quiet. Boy, that got rough. But I'm going to use one of my handy dandy homemade tools. This is, it used to be a knitting needle. cut the end off. I'm going to use that to help me smooth out this seam here. We're having another snowstorm outside. There we go. So it's a nice time to be in my studio working. I don't have to go anywhere. The roads and streets out there are slick. Oh, I got my van stuck in the snow the other day on the ice. On the ice. I couldn't get off the ice. I had to have the neighbor come and pull me off with his handy dandy 4-wheel drive diesel truck. Now I got a little ding there, so I'm going to use my knitting needle and kind of help me to smooth that out a little bit more. Just very gently. There we go. Sometimes my short little fingernails get in the way. See that one? That's long for me. My fingernails are always short because they're very weak and they tear. And if I put polish or something like that on them, it doesn't stay on. I can feel the extra weight on my fingernails and I chew it off. I know it's dumb, but I do. Okay. Straighten out those edges. Stamp it. Where's my stamp? Seems like every time I put that stamp down, I can't find it. Here it is. Put a stamp on it. Put it on my tray. And I will bake it. Oh, okay. Here we go. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can see it from my angle. Oh, there's a bubble. There's a little tiny bubble there, and we don't want that because it will expand. When we bake it, the heat will expand it and we'll have a big bubble. So what I'm going to do is find my bubble popper, which got put someplace else. And I can't find it. What did I do with it? Yeah, I can't find it. Well, I can't find my bubble popper. What a bubble popper is basically it's 3 little tiny needles in a clay handle. Oh, here it is. So I put 3 little sharp beading needles in a clay handle. And I will use that to pop that bubble. There it is. Pop that bubble and then very carefully push the air out. And because that hole is really small, it's easy to cover up and disappear. So now it's gone. See if there's any more bubbles. I don't see any. Okay. And bubbles happen. They happen. So this one's ready to go on the tray. And I'm going to continue working with that veneer I made. And I've got more of these to cover. And I'm going to keep going. And I will come back when I get to the next stage in the process. This is what I use to sand my seam rippers. I use what's called a mini lathe. I purchased it on Amazon. I believe I paid under $50 for it. I'll find the link and include it in the description. It's small. It's under 12 inches long. and it does the job for me. This is the mandrel I ended up buying for my lathe. It came about 12 inches long. I had to have 3 inches cut off, and it came with some small bushings. I use Abranet sanding product. I will put the link in the description. I order packs from Megs Bonham because she has put them together in grit that I use. You can buy longer pieces other places. I just purchased, I prefer the kits. Here we have my sanding setup. I have my lathe sitting on the cookie sheet, but I don't have a hood that would suck out all the sawdust when I'm sanding. So what I do is I use these white linen towels that I use for just about everything, and I cover my work table, I cover my walls, I cover as much as I can with the towels. That way any sanding grit that will spatter all over when I'm done, I can just grab those towels and throw them in the washing machine. Here is my sanding setup for my seam rippers. I have this set at an angle so that any moisture or water that I use rolls it down to this edge. And I've done some sanding, and you can see already that there's a buildup of sawdust or polymer dust. So make sure that you wear a mask. This dried out from last night, so this is dry powder. This is why we wet sand, so we don't have to deal with as much of the sanding powder as we do. So I have my bowl of water. This is warm water with just a drop of dish soap in it. My Abranet sanding things I fold in half, and I have them soaking so they're wet when I use them. I usually have a hand towel around just because I use it a lot. Now this is called the mandrel. This piece, when I purchased this mini lathe, it did not come with a mandrel. And I ended up having to buy one that was longer and taking it to my local shop and having it cut down to fit, because they do not sell, or if they do, I couldn't find it, mandrels that fit these mini lathes. So my first step is to use these bushings. Put a bushing on. That's actually a spacer, not a bushing. This is the bushing, and it's sized to fit the tubes. So we put that on, and we put the tube for the seam ripper on, another bushing, and then in this case, this depending on the size of the tube or the barrel here, how many spacers you need can change. In this case, I'm going to use 2. Put those 2 on. This is the nut, or I'm not sure what it's called, used to tighten that down so that this is stable and doesn't move. And then we put the end on with that point going right into the end of the mandrel. And this always takes a little fussing here. There we go. Tighten that down. Okay. So this, like I mentioned earlier, is tilted so that any moisture that I use to wet sand stays away from the electrical parts on this edge. So the first step is to start with, this is Abranet in 180 grit. Now I smooth these down as best I can before I sand them. This one has a piece of futz on it there. But if you're working with polymer clay, you know that it doesn't always get totally smooth. So I'm going to come with the wet sandpaper and start it. I'm rinsing my sandpaper to get to clean it up. And I'm moving all along the edge so I get everything. Mix it some more. Now I'm going to use my dry towel. Well, it's dry now, but I'm going to wet that down and I'm going to wipe it down. That's to clean up any of the grit that might be left on there from sanding it. Then I'm going to use a dry spot to dry it off a little bit and blow on it to dry it, and then turn it off and take a look. When you're starting with a heavy grit like this, you can see, I don't know if you can see that in the camera or not, but you can, if you look closely, you can see lines and you can tell where the sandpaper has not hit. Like right in here, there's a little area that has not been hit by the sandpaper. So when it's finished, you're going to feel that. So I'll come back with some more sand, with that grit again, and sand some more. Here's another spot. And I'll keep sanding and then turn it off and checking it before I move on to the next grit. I want this to be as smooth as it can be at that grit before I move on to the next one. I like to fold my sandpaper in half so I can switch back and forth from different sides to clean areas. Oh, I've got a spot there that the sandpaper didn't hit. And a couple more spots there. So I'm going to continue with this grit again. Now, if you have a veneer, you have to be careful when sanding, because if you have a veneer and it's too thin, some of this coarse sandpaper will go right through it to whatever, it'll go right through it to whatever you have underneath. This isn't a veneer, this is a thicker veneer. This is oh gosh, that's got to be at least a number 4 or 5 on my pasta machine. So I'm not too worried about it going through to the base layer because it's solid all the way through. But in some cases, if it's a thin veneer, then it would go all the way through to the base layer. Now I've still got one area here that's not smooth. And I've got one here I'd missed last time. So I'm going to do it again. I still have one spot right there. All right, now I got it. So now I'm going to move on to the next grid. Did I get this one? Yeah, I got that one too. So this is important because this will reduce the sanding time needed for the other grits by a lot. So now I'm going to move on to my next one, which is, see, that was 180. So next one will be 220. Here it is. So I'll move on to the 220 grid. And these I won't need to use as much as I used the first one. So I'm going to continue going through this with up to my last grid of Abernet, which is at 600. And then I'll come back to you and show you what the next stage is. Okay, something I didn't do that I just realized is I usually put some shelf liner underneath this so it doesn't slide around. It's shelf liner about to line my drawers in my kitchen, so I'm just going to put that underneath there. And that'll help to keep the pan from sliding around when I'm using it. Okay, so now it's nice and smooth. I've gone up to my 600 grit. My next step is I'm just going to use, I use these white dish towels for just about everything. So I'm just going to use this cotton dish towel, and I'm going to dampen it first and then buff it with the dish towel. Now I'm going to use a dish towel dry. And you have to be really careful with this, because if you use it with too much force, the fabric will actually sand through the clay, and you'll get some rough areas. So I'm just going to very carefully buff it with the fabric. Yeah, that's pretty good. I got some sanding lines here and there. So I'll probably go back a couple grits to clean up some of these sanding lines that are still showing through. But for the most part, this is done. And I have a bag to go through. So I will go through all of these and get them all standed up to this point. And then I'll come back to you probably tomorrow and show you what my next stage is. Another thing to remember is to change your sanding water, or the water that's holding your sandpaper. Change it often, because it has grit in there from the previous projects. or the previous things that you've sanded. So you want to change that often so you don't reintroduce that to your sanding. It'll slow you down. Here's the tube after sanding today. Oop. Here's the tube after sanding today. This little spot here is my stamp that says Jenny P. It's nice and shiny and smooth and feels nice. So I've gone through and I have sanded all my seam rippers to the first stage, and I wanted to show you here. So this is where I'm at now, and this is a nice sanded finish to 600 grit. It's smooth and satiny. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magic juice, and I'm going to do some more polishing on my seam rippers. And this is an example of what it will look like when it's finished. You can see that beautiful sheen on there. And this is the same veneer, so it's a good comparison. This has been sanded and polished up to 600 grit. This I've finished with the magic juice, so I get this nice sheen. Now the magic juice, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I just know it gives me a really fine finish. And I will show you how I use that. So I have put my seam ripper on my lathe. Each bottle is numbered. This is number 1, and I have cut some shop towels. I buy these shop towels. They're heavy duty. I get them at our local Menards, and then I cut them into, I don't know, 2 or 3 inch squares, and I have 1 piece for each grit in the magic juice. I don't want to contaminate. Once I've sanded it with or polished with number 1, I don't want to use number 1 again 3 steps later. So I have these. One is for each individual grit, and I've numbered them so I can keep track. And I like to use them wet, so I'm going to dip them in my water. The first step here is number 1. And I'm just going to put a little bit on there. The instructions on the bottle say about the amount you need is about the same amount as what's like the end of a pencil eraser. I don't use quite that much, but I do put it on, and I rub it on with my finger because otherwise it tends to splatter all over. So I rub it around with my finger, and then I'll come back with the cloth. It doesn't take much. That should do it for that one. And I have another piece of shop towel here, an extra piece I'd cut, and it's just wet with water. So I'm going to wipe that off so I get all that extra number 1 grit off of there. And then I'll start with number 2. And like before, I stop the machine and I put it on. Whoop, and rub it around with my finger. And now I'm going to use number 2, and this one is dry, so I'm going to wet that down. I'm not holding it in one place because I don't want to over polish one area and not the rest of it. And so I just go back and forth a little bit. And again, I'm going to wipe that off with just a plain towel. And basically, those are the stages I go through. I will continue to do that through number 6. And I will come back to you when I have them all done and I'm ready for assembly. So here we are. I have all my my tubes covered, sanded, polished, and ready for assembly. So to assemble these, I'm taking the rest of the components out of the kit. Let me move these out of the way. Come on. In the kit we have two pieces, which are the springs that hold the ends into the seam in the tube. This is the stylus for this one. These are two-sided, so one side is the stylus and one side is the seam ripper. And this is the seam ripper. And these are the springs. So we'll take that out. Come out of there. Needs a little coaxing. Here we go. Get the other one out. All right. So these springs go into the end of the seam ripper. They're a little tricky. You gotta make them round and hold that in place. I haven't figured out an easy way to do this. And then you slide it in. Get it all the way in there. Come on. Like I said, I have not figured out the easy way to do this. There, that works. There. And now that's down inside there. And when you push the seam ripper in, it'll stay in place. So let's do the other side. Sometimes it goes in easier than the other. There we go. There we go. That's all ready. Now, because this has the plastic on the end, which I'm going to leave on, it's not going to go in all the way. So the other side is going to stick out a little bit. Once you take that plastic piece off, then it fits in the other way. So here we go. Now it's all ready to go. And I have however many I have here ready to finish up. And I can go on to my next project. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I will try to put some of my sources down in the description underneath. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps a lot to get subscriptions. Have a great day.